On my 57th birthday at my daughter's penthouse, I felt dizzy and went to the kitchen for water. What I saw there shocked me so badly that I faked a heart attack right on the spot. I'm about to die. At least that's what my daughter Riley thinks. She's sitting across from me in her Seattle penthouse, watching me with predatory focus as she slides a champagne flute toward my hand. The liquid inside looks golden and celebratory. It's actually laced with enough antifreeze to cause kidney failure within 12 hours. I know this because 3 minutes ago I watched her husband Devin prepare it. I saw him measure the poison with a syringe. I heard him tell Riley, 3 milliliters total. It'll look like natural causes when she dies tomorrow. Before we continue, if you believe that mothers deserve better than betrayal from their own children, please hit that subscribe button. It's free and helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Now let's see how I survived. It's my 57th birthday, November 8th, and I came to dinner thinking Riley wanted to reconnect. The invitation 2 weeks ago had sounded so warm, so genuine. I want to make it special, Mom. Just the 3 of us. I'll cook your favorite meal. What she actually meant was, I want to make it look like natural causes, Mom. Just the 3 of us. So there are no witnesses. The first dose was in the mimosa she handed me when I arrived. I noticed the strange taste, too sweet, chemical, but I drank it anyway because I wanted so desperately to believe my daughter still loved me. Now my head is spinning and my vision is blurred, exactly the way Devin planned. The disorientation was intentional. Make the victim weak and compliant before delivering the fatal dose. To you, Mom, Riley says, her voice honey-sweet and hollow. Happy birthday. Devin is leaning forward slightly in his chair, watching me with barely concealed impatience. They're $480,000 in debt. I found the statements last month. They're about to lose this penthouse, the luxury cars, the designer lifestyle they've built on credit cards and lies. They think killing me will solve everything. They think my life insurance policy and retirement account will save them. They have no idea that I own a $180 million commercial property portfolio. That I've spent 32 years building an empire in complete silence. That the modest retiree they see, the woman in clearance rack blazers who clips coupons and drives a dented Camry, is actually one of the wealthiest property owners in Washington state. I kept it secret because I wanted Riley to develop her own character, her own work ethic. I wanted her to appreciate sacrifice and understand the value of hard work. I thought hiding my wealth would make her strong and independent. Instead, it just made her willing to kill me. I look at the champagne glass. I look at my daughter's face, tight with anticipation. I look at Devin's cold, calculating eyes. And I make my move. I clutch my chest and gasp. My hand flies to my sternum. The champagne flute slips from my grasp and shatters on the marble floor, sending golden poison spraying across Riley's $8,000 area rug. Mom. Riley shrieks, but she doesn't move toward me. I let my knees buckle. I crash to the floor, letting my body go limp. Through my closed eyelids, I hear them panicking, not about me dying but about the evidence soaking into their carpet. What they don't hear is the sound of sirens already approaching. The police I texted 5 minutes ago from the bathroom. The forensics team my attorney is bringing. The private investigator recording everything from his van across the street. They think I'm dying. They think they've won. They have no idea that Brooklyn Carter doesn't lose. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a mother ends up faking her own death on her birthday while her only child watches and waits for the poison to work. Because understanding who I am makes everything else make sense. My name is Brooklyn Carter. I'm 57 years old, and for 3 decades I've lived a carefully constructed double life. When people see me at the grocery store or on the bus, they see exactly what I want them to see. A retired real estate agent in sensible shoes from Payless and blazers from the Macy's clearance rack. I live in a small rent-controlled apartment in Capitol Hill, the same 2-bedroom unit I moved into when Riley was a toddler. My 2009 Toyota Camry has a dented bumper on the passenger side that I've never bothered to fix. Every Sunday morning, I sit at my kitchen table clipping coupons with reading glasses I bought at the dollar store. My neighbors think I'm barely scraping by. Mrs. Martinez downstairs has offered to help me apply for food assistance programs. The Johnsons in 3B bring me casseroles when they think I look too thin. The building superintendent gives me a break on my rent sometimes because he feels sorry for me. What none of them know, what nobody knows except my attorney Vanessa Hartwell, is that I control one of the largest commercial property portfolios in Washington state. Carter and Associates Holdings. The name exists on legal documents buried under layers of LLCs and trust structures designed to keep my identity private. 17 office buildings scattered across Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane. 6 shopping centers, including 2 in neighborhoods that have tripled in value over the past decade. A dozen residential complexes with hundreds of units generating steady rental income every month. The whole operation is worth $180 million, and it essentially runs itself now. A machine I built from nothing that deposits money into accounts my daughter doesn't know exist. It started small. One rundown duplex I bought at a county tax auction in 1992 for $47,000. I'd been working as a real estate agent for 3 years, living paycheck to paycheck, raising Riley completely alone in a 1-bedroom apartment where she slept in a crib beside my bed. That duplex was in a neighborhood everyone said was hopeless, too far gone to recover. But I saw something others didn't. I saw the new light rail line being planned 2 blocks away. I saw the coffee shop that had just opened on the corner, the first sign of change coming. I bought it with every penny I'd saved and maxed out 2 credit cards for repairs. I did most of the renovation work myself because I couldn't afford contractors. Patched drywall at midnight after Riley fell asleep. Painted trim on Saturday mornings while she watched cartoons. Learned basic plumbing from library books. 6 months later, I rented both units for twice what the previous owner had charged. A year after that, I sold the building for $89,000 and used the profit to buy 2 more properties. For 3 decades, I repeated that pattern. Work triple shifts as a real estate agent. Find undervalued properties before anyone else noticed them. Buy low, improve strategically, rent or sell high. Reinvest every single penny. Never upgrade my lifestyle. Never tell anyone what I was building. I worked open houses on weekends while Riley napped in her carrier beside the sign-in sheet. I brought her to client meetings in a stroller, apologizing to buyers who looked annoyed by her presence. I missed her first steps because I was showing a condo to a difficult investor. I missed her dance recital because I was closing a deal on a strip mall in Olympia. The wealth accumulated slowly at first, then faster than I'd imagined possible. But I never changed my apartment or bought a new car or wore expensive clothes. I kept it all hidden because I had a philosophy about raising my daughter. I wanted Riley to develop her own character, her own work ethic, her own sense of accomplishment. I didn't want her to become one of those trust fund kids who never learned the value of hard work, who coasted on their parents' success and contributed nothing to the world. So I let her believe I was struggling. Let her think I'd taken out massive loans to pay for her dance lessons and her college tuition. I wanted her to see sacrifice, to understand that everything worth having requires effort and dedication. When she got into the University of Washington, I paid her entire tuition by quietly selling 2 apartment buildings I'd acquired in Belltown. She never knew those buildings existed. She thought I'd buried myself in debt to give her an education, and I encouraged that belief. I wanted her to feel the weight of my sacrifice, to be motivated by gratitude, to build a life that honored what I'd given her. I thought I was teaching her values. I thought I was making her strong and independent and resilient. I was catastrophically wrong. Riley's father walked out when she was 3 months old. I woke up one morning to find a note on the kitchen counter, written on the back of a utility bill. I'm not ready for fatherhood. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me. Tom had packed a duffel bag and left for California with a woman he'd met at a sales conference. I never heard from him again. No child support. No birthday cards. No explanation beyond those 2 sentences. So I raised Riley completely alone. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 22, and I was an only child with no extended family. No siblings to call for help. No aunts or uncles or cousins. Just me and Riley against the world. And I was determined to make that world as good as I possibly could for her. I gave her everything I could manage. Dance lessons when she was 5 because she loved twirling in the living room. Summer camp every year at Lake Chelan because she adored swimming and making friendship bracelets. A bedroom of her own when she turned 8, which meant I moved my property management files out of the closet and worked at the kitchen table instead. I made sure she went to schools in good districts even though it meant longer commutes for me. But the empire I was building demanded time. So much time. I missed parent-teacher conferences because I was inspecting a building with foundation problems. I missed her middle school graduation because a tenant dispute in Spokane required immediate attention. I missed her prom send-off because I was negotiating a purchase agreement that couldn't wait. Every time I missed something, I told myself it was worth it. I was building her future. Securing her inheritance. Making sure she'd never struggle the way I had. I was being a good mother in the only way I knew how, by working myself to exhaustion to provide financial security she didn't even know existed. The first warning sign appeared when Riley was 24. She brought Devin Garrison home for Thanksgiving. He claimed he worked in tech consulting, which I quickly realized was code for unemployed with big ideas and no follow-through. He wore a Rolex that turned out to be fake. He drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford. He spent the entire dinner talking about disrupting industries and scaling startups without ever explaining what any of it actually meant. He looked around my small apartment with barely concealed disgust. Made jokes about my furniture being vintage in a way that wasn't complimentary. Asked why I didn't invest in cryptocurrency or flip properties for quick cash. Completely oblivious to the irony since I was already doing exactly that, just quietly without bragging to strangers at holiday dinners. But what hurt most was Riley's reaction. She laughed along with his condescension. A new kind of laugh I'd never heard before. Sharp, performative, designed to create distance between us. She was embarrassed by me. Embarrassed by my modest apartment and my clearance rack clothes and my sensible life. When I pulled her aside in the kitchen and gently suggested that Devin seemed more interested in appearances than substance, she turned on me with genuine anger. You're just jealous that I found someone successful. You've been alone your whole life. You don't understand what it's like to build something with a partner. The words stung deeply, but I convinced myself it was just normal mother-daughter tension. They got married 6 months later in a ceremony that cost $85,000. I found out later through my private investigator that the entire wedding was financed with credit cards. 12 different cards, all maxed out, all carrying interest rates above 20%. That's when the real distance started. Over the next 3 years, Riley's phone calls became less frequent. Her visits became rarer. She stopped asking how I was doing and started making pointed suggestions instead. Had I thought about downsizing? Should I consider selling the Camry? Maybe I should look into senior living communities with meal plans? She was trying to convince me to liquidate what she thought were my only assets so she could access whatever equity existed. She didn't know the apartment was rent-controlled and worth nothing to sell. She didn't know the Camry was paid off and perfectly reliable despite its dented bumper. Last month, during one of her supposed migraine episodes when she asked me to help organize her mail, I found what I'd been dreading. Property tax notices with late fees stacking up. Collection letters from 3 different agencies. Credit card statements showing $480,000 in combined debt across 9 cards and 3 personal loans. They were drowning in their own financial decisions and they were desperate. I didn't confront her. I quietly photographed everything with my phone and asked Marcus Webb, my private investigator, to intensify his monitoring of their finances. I needed to understand exactly how bad things had gotten. Then 2 weeks ago, Riley called with that warm, syrupy voice I didn't recognize. She invited me to dinner for my birthday. Just the 3 of us at her penthouse. She'd cook my favorite meal. We'd celebrate properly. She wanted to reconnect after being distant. Something felt wrong about the invitation, but I wanted so desperately to believe her. I wanted to believe my daughter still loved me somewhere beneath the debt and the designer clothes and Devin's toxic influence. So I said yes. I accepted the invitation. I had no idea I was walking into a trap. Now here I am, lying on Riley's cold marble floor with my eyes closed, listening to her and Devin panic about the champagne I spilled. The poison meant to kill me is soaking into their expensive rug instead of destroying my kidneys. And the sirens are getting louder. The sirens are still distant, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, but getting closer with every second. I stay perfectly still on Riley's marble floor, my body limp, my breathing shallow and irregular. Through my closed eyelids, I can hear Devin's footsteps, frantic, pacing back and forth across the living room. Why are there so many? His voice cracks with panic. Riley, did you call 911 yet? No. Riley's voice comes from somewhere near the kitchen. You said to wait. You said we had to make sure she was actually. Then who called them? The question hangs in the air. I can almost feel their paranoia thickening, their certainty crumbling. They're realizing something has gone terribly wrong with their perfect plan. But to understand how we got here, to this moment where I'm playing dead while my daughter panics about evidence, you need to know how this birthday dinner actually started. Because 5 hours ago I had no idea what was coming. 5 hours ago I still believed my daughter might love me. November 8th arrived cold and drizzly, the kind of typical Seattle weather that seeps into your bones. I took the bus to Riley's building because parking downtown costs a fortune and I've never believed in wasting money on unnecessary expenses. The number 10 dropped me off at First Avenue, and I walked the last 2 blocks with my umbrella fighting against the wind. Harbor Steps Tower rose above me like a glass monument to wealth I knew Riley and Devin didn't actually have. The lobby was all gleaming marble and modern art sculptures, twisted metal pieces that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, each crystal catching the light and throwing rainbows across the polished floor. The doorman looked up from his desk as I approached. His eyes swept over me, my practical raincoat from Target, my sensible shoes, my purse that had seen better days. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely concealed judgment. I could see the question forming in his mind. What is this woman doing here? I'm here to see Riley Garrison, I said, keeping my voice steady and polite. Penthouse 2207. His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprise flickering across his face before he caught himself. Of course. Name. Brooklyn Carter. Her mother. Recognition dawned, followed immediately by a careful neutrality that told me everything I needed to know. Riley had never mentioned me to the building staff. Or if she had, it wasn't in any context that suggested pride or affection. Elevators to your left, he said, waving vaguely without looking up again. The ride to the 22nd floor felt endless. The elevator was lined with mirrors on 3 sides, and I caught my reflection from multiple angles. A woman who looked every year of her 57, gray hair that needed touching up, lines around her eyes from decades of stress and sleepless nights. I straightened my collar and told myself it didn't matter what I looked like. This was my daughter. She'd invited me here. She wanted to reconnect. The elevator chimed and the doors slid open onto a small private hallway with only 2 doors. Riley was standing outside the left one, and for a moment, just a flash, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who'd run to meet me at the door after work, throwing her arms around my legs and chattering about her day. Then the moment passed. The woman in front of me was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Mom. She stepped forward, her arms opening for a hug. She was dressed in a silk blouse the color of champagne and designer jeans that still had those crisp creases down the front from being recently purchased. Her hair was styled in loose waves that probably cost $200 at a salon. Diamond studs, or what I assumed were meant to look like diamonds, glinted in her ears. The hug felt wrong. Too brief. Too stiff. Like she was embracing someone for a photograph, holding the pose just long enough for it to count before pulling away. Happy birthday, Mom, she said, but her eyes were somewhere else. They flicked past me toward the elevator, then back, then toward the open door of her penthouse. Distracted. Calculating. Like she was checking off boxes on a mental list. Thank you for inviting me, I said, meaning it despite the awkwardness. It's been too long. I know. I'm sorry about that. Things have just been so crazy with Devin's business and the renovation projects and, well, you know how it is. She gestured for me to follow her inside. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. The penthouse took my breath away, but not in a good way. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the far wall, offering a panoramic view of Elliott Bay and the Seattle skyline. The furniture was all sharp angles and minimalist design, beautiful but uncomfortable looking. Everything was white or gray or glass. Modern art hung on the walls, abstract pieces that probably had names like Untitled Number 7, and price tags that would make normal people weep. But what hit me hardest was the smell. White orchids. Massive arrangements of them scattered throughout the space, their cloying sweetness so overpowering it made my head ache within seconds. The scent masked something else underneath, something chemical and sharp that I couldn't quite identify. Wow, I said because Riley was watching me, waiting for a reaction. This is beautiful. 4.2 million, Riley said, a note of pride creeping into her voice. We got it for a steal, actually. The previous owner needed to sell fast. Devin handled the whole negotiation. I nodded, remembering the property tax notices I'd seen in her mail last month. The ones showing they were 3 months behind. The ones that would lead to foreclosure proceedings if they didn't catch up soon. Brooklyn. Devon's voice came from the dining area. He was sitting at the table with a glass of red wine, his posture deliberately casual. Legs crossed, one arm draped over the back of his chair. He didn't stand when I entered. Didn't smile. You made it. I was starting to think you'd gotten lost on the bus. The comment landed exactly as he intended it. A small cruelty. A reminder that I was beneath him, that I took public transportation while he drove a luxury car, that I existed in a different economic class. Traffic was light, I said simply, refusing to take the bait. Riley materialized beside me with a champagne flute filled with something orange and fizzy. Here, Mom. I made you a birthday mimosa. It's a special recipe, orange juice, champagne, and a splash of peach nectar. Your favorite fruits. I'd never told her peaches were my favorite. She was guessing, filling in details about a mother she'd never bothered to truly know. But I took the glass anyway, smiling my thanks. The first sip tasted wrong immediately. Too sweet, like someone had dumped simple syrup into it. And underneath the sweetness was something else. A chemical aftertaste that made my tongue feel slightly numb, like I'd been to the dentist. I assumed it was cheap champagne or artificial juice, the kind of corner cutting that people drowning in debt resort to. I forced myself to take another sip so Riley wouldn't feel rejected. The numbness spread slightly, a tingling sensation in my mouth that felt distinctly unpleasant. Sit, Riley said, guiding me toward the dining table. Dinner's almost ready. I made your favorite pot roast with carrots and potatoes. I'd mentioned liking pot roast once, maybe 15 years ago. The fact that she'd remembered felt like a small victory, a sign that maybe she did still care somewhere beneath all this distance. Devon watched me settle into my chair across from him. His eyes were cold, assessing like I was a problem he was trying to solve. So Brooklyn, he said, swirling his wine. Riley mentioned your birthday. 57, right? That's a tough age. Health starts declining. Memory issues. You taking care of yourself? I'm fine, thank you. Because we worry, you know. Living alone at your age in that neighborhood. Capitol Hill's gotten rough. All those homeless camps. We keep telling you, you should think about downsizing. Maybe one of those senior communities with meal plans and activities. Wouldn't that be better than struggling alone? I gripped my champagne flute a little tighter. I'm not struggling. And I like my apartment. But for how much longer? Devon leaned forward, his voice taking on a tone of false concern that made my skin crawl. Be realistic. You're not getting any younger. What happens when you can't manage stairs anymore? When you need help with basic tasks? Riley and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time to make some practical decisions about your future. Riley appeared from the kitchen carrying a platter. She set it down in the center of the table, pot roast that actually looked and smelled delicious, but she didn't meet my eyes. Devon, let's not talk about this now, she murmured. It's Mom's birthday. I'm just being practical, Devon said. Someone has to be. Brooklyn, no offense, but you've been living hand-to-mouth your entire life. You worked yourself to the bone raising Riley, and what do you have to show for it? A rent-controlled apartment and a car that should have been scrapped 5 years ago. Riley told me you clipped coupons, for God's sake. In 2024. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my voice level. I live within my means. There's no shame in that. No, but there's no wisdom in it either. You're sitting on what, $400,000 in your 401k? Maybe more? That's just rotting in some low-yield account while your own daughter is trying to build something real. We've got this wellness startup. Meditation apps, corporate wellness programs, huge market potential, and we're looking for seed investors. You could triple your money in 18 months. Instead, you're hoarding it like some Depression-era miser while Riley loses everything. The words hit me like physical blows. Not because they hurt, I'd heard worse from business rivals over the years, but because Riley was sitting right there saying nothing. Not defending me. Not telling her husband to stop. Just serving pot roast onto plates with her head down and her shoulders tense. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm not in a position to invest right now. Not in a position? Devon's voice rose slightly. You're literally sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your daughter is drowning in debt trying to maintain a lifestyle that shows she's successful, and you won't lift a finger to help her. What kind of mother does that? Devon. Riley's voice was quiet but sharp. That's enough. But it wasn't enough for Devon. He was just getting started and I could see the desperation behind his anger now. The panic of a man watching his constructed reality collapse. That's when the dizziness hit. Sudden. Disorienting. The room tilted sideways like I was on a ship in rough water. My vision blurred at the edges, everything going slightly soft and out of focus. My hands felt heavy and clumsy as I gripped the edge of the marble table, trying to steady myself. This wasn't my blood pressure medication needing adjustment. This wasn't stress or anxiety. This was something chemical, something wrong being introduced into my system. I just need some water, I managed to say, my voice coming out thinner than I intended. The kitchen, I'll just grab a glass. Devon's response was immediate and, in retrospect, completely revealing. His tone shifted from hostile to performatively concerned in a single breath. Sit down, Brooklyn. You look terrible. Riley will get it for you. You need to rest. But every instinct I'd developed over decades of navigating dangerous business deals was screaming at me to move. To get away. To find out what was happening. No, I said, pushing myself to my feet despite my unsteady legs. I need to walk it off. I'll be fine. I stumbled toward the hallway, one hand on the wall for support. My heart was pounding, not from exertion but from a fear I couldn't yet name. Behind me, I heard Riley and Devon's voices drop to urgent whispers. Too quiet to make out the words but sharp with tension. The hallway stretched before me longer than it should have been. And that's when I noticed what I'd been too distracted to see when I arrived. The walls were covered with photographs. Enormous black and white prints in expensive frames. Riley and Devon at what looked like a charity gala, both in formal wear, champagne glasses raised. Riley and Devon on a yacht, the Mediterranean coastline behind them. Riley and Devon in ski gear at some resort. Mountain peaks in the background. Every single image showed wealth and status they didn't actually possess. Every frame told a story of success built entirely on borrowed money and lies. But what broke my heart was the absence. Not a single photograph included me. Not one image from Riley's childhood. Not the picture from her college graduation where I stood beside her in my thrift store suit, so proud I could barely speak. That photo used to sit on her bookshelf in her first apartment. She kept it for years. Now it was gone. Erased. Like I'd never existed. Like the sacrifices I'd made, the life I'd built for her, meant nothing compared to these carefully staged images of a fake life. My legs carried me forward, but my heart was breaking with each step. The dizziness was getting worse, my vision narrowing at the edges. I reached out to steady myself against the wall and my hand left a smudge on the pristine white paint. That's when I heard the voices coming from the kitchen. Hushed but urgent. Conspiratorial. I pressed my back against the wall and peered through the narrow gap where the door stood slightly ajar. And everything I thought I knew about my daughter shattered in an instant. And everything I thought I knew about my daughter shattered in an instant. Through the 3-inch gap in the kitchen door, I could see Devon standing at the center island. The recessed lighting cast sharp shadows across his face, making him look like something from a nightmare. In front of him sat my champagne flute. The one I'd left on the coffee table in the living room when I'd excused myself. But it wasn't alone anymore. Beside it sat a small amber vial. No label. No prescription information. Just dark glass catching the light. Next to that was a graduated syringe, the kind with precise measurement markings etched along the side. The kind you'd use in a laboratory. Or the kind you'd use if you needed to get a dosage exactly right. My breath caught in my throat, creating a small sound I immediately regretted. I pressed myself flatter against the hallway wall, praying they hadn't heard. Devon was holding the vial up to the light, examining it with the clinical detachment of someone conducting a science experiment. Not the nervous energy of someone about to commit murder. Just cold, calculated focus. Riley stood by the farmhouse sink on the far side of the kitchen. Her back was to me, but I could see her hands gripping the granite countertop, her knuckles bone white from the pressure. That Cartier bracelet Devon had given her for their second anniversary, the one that had probably added another $15,000 to their debt, caught the light and sparkled with obscene cheerfulness. How much did you already give her? Riley's voice was barely above a whisper, but the kitchen's marble surfaces and steel appliances created perfect acoustics. Every word carried to where I stood frozen in the hallway. My mind was screaming at me. Run. Call the police. Do something. But my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed by the absolute impossibility of what I was witnessing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my daughter discussing. "zero point 5 milliliters in the mimosa," Devon said, and his tone was so matter-of-fact it made my stomach turn. Like he was explaining a cooking measurement. Like this was a recipe he'd followed before. Just enough to make her disoriented and compliant. "The antifreeze is sweet. Masks itself in orange juice perfectly." She didn't even hesitate when she drank it. Antifreeze. The word echoed in my skull. The chemical taste I'd noticed. The strange numbness in my mouth. The dizziness that had come on so suddenly. They'd already poisoned me. "Now we finish it with the champagne," Devon continued, unscrewing the vial cap with steady hands. 3 milliliters total. That's the key, not too much that it's obvious but enough to guarantee results. CDC toxicology reports are very specific about ethylene glycol. For someone her size with her blood pressure issues, 3 milliliters will cause acute kidney failure within 8 to 12 hours. Looks exactly like natural causes. He began drawing liquid from the vial into the syringe, pulling the plunger back with practiced precision. The clear fluid filled the chamber slowly, measured and deliberate. Riley's shoulders were shaking. For a moment I thought maybe she was crying. Maybe some part of my daughter was still in there, horrified by what they were planning. Then I realized she wasn't crying. She was just trembling with nerves. "What if someone orders an autopsy?" Riley asked, her voice tight and high-pitched. "What if they test for it?" "They won't." Devon's confidence was absolute. He held the syringe up to the light, checking the measurement. "Think about it logically. She's 57 years old. She has documented hypertension. Her medical records show she's non-compliant with her medication. I checked when I accessed her patient portal using that password reset trick. She just had a heavy meal with wine and rich food. When an overweight, hypertensive woman in her late 50s dies suddenly after dinner, the automatic assumption is cardiac event or kidney failure." He positioned the needle over my champagne flute and slowly injected the contents, his hand perfectly steady. The clear liquid disappeared into the golden bubbles without a trace. "Plus," Devon continued, setting the empty syringe down and swirling the glass gently, "she has no siblings. No close friends. You told me yourself she burned those bridges years ago being obsessed with work. No one's going to demand additional testing. No one's going to question the narrative we provide. We're her only family. We control the story." The casual cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He'd thought through every angle, anticipated every question, prepared answers for every potential complication. This was an impulse. This was a plan. A detailed, researched, carefully constructed plan to murder me and make it look like natural causes. "We just need to make sure she drinks it all," Devon said, examining the champagne flute with satisfaction. "Once we get her back to the table we pour this and make a toast. Birthday celebration. She'll drink it because she's desperate for your approval, desperate to believe you still care about her. Then we wait." "How long?" Riley's voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "The preliminary symptoms start in 4 to 6 hours. Nausea, confusion, increased heart rate. We'll act concerned, offer to call for help, but she'll probably insist she's fine. You know how she is, never wants to be a burden. By the time she gets really bad she'll be home in that apartment. Alone. She'll probably call 911 herself when the pain gets unbearable, but by then it'll be too late. Kidneys will be shutting down. Even if they figure out it's poisoning, there's no way to trace it back to us." "But murder, Devon." Riley finally turned away from the sink. I could see her face now, pale and drawn. "We're talking about murder. She's my mother." For one desperate, agonizing moment I thought she might refuse. I thought I might see some spark of the little girl I'd raised. The one who used to wrap her arms around my neck and whisper, "I love you, Mommy," before bed. The one who'd made me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings and crooked hearts. But Devon stepped toward her, his expression hardening into something cold and frightening. "She's an obstacle," he said, and each word felt like a knife. "Look at our situation, Riley. Really look at it. We're 6 weeks from foreclosure. The credit cards are maxed. The car payments are 2 months behind. Your business failed. My business failed. We have nothing except this penthouse we can't afford and a lifestyle we can't maintain. But killing her isn't killing. It's survival. Devon grabbed Riley's shoulders, forcing her to look at him. She's 57. She's lived her life. A mediocre, small, meaningless life, but she lived it. We're 35 and 37. We have decades ahead of us. Decades that will be spent in bankruptcy and shame and poverty unless we do something drastic right now. The life insurance is only $400,000, Riley said weakly. Plus whatever's in her retirement accounts. Plus the equity in that apartment when we force a sale. Plus whatever else she's hiding. I guarantee you there's more. She's been squirreling away money her whole life like some paranoid Depression-era hoarder. Once we have power of attorney we can access everything. Liquidate it all. She'd never give us power of attorney. She won't have to. Devon's smile was cruel and knowing. Once she's incapacitated from the kidney failure, we petition the court for emergency medical guardianship. Given her condition and the fact that we're her only family, it's automatic. Then we make the compassionate decision to remove life support if it comes to that, and we inherit everything. Inevitable. The casual way he'd mapped out my death, not just my death but the systematic plundering of everything I'd built, made my vision go white at the edges. Riley stared at her husband for a long moment. I could see her chest rising and falling with rapid, shallow breaths. Her hands twisted together, the wedding ring she'd bought on credit catching the light. Then she nodded. Just a small dip of her chin. Almost imperceptible. But it was there. Okay, she whispered. Hey. But we have to be careful. Every detail has to be perfect. If anyone suspects, no one will suspect. Devon pulled her into an embrace, stroking her hair like she was a child he was comforting. We've planned this perfectly. In 24 hours this will all be over. Your mother will be gone, our debts will be paid, and we'll finally have the life we deserve. The life we deserve, Riley repeated, and the hollow way she said it made me want to scream. I backed away from the door with legs that barely supported my weight. My back hit the wall across the hallway and I had to bite down on my fist to keep from making a sound. My own daughter. The child I'd carried for 9 months. The baby I'd nursed in the middle of the night. The little girl I'd rocked through nightmares and held through tears and sacrificed everything to protect. She just agreed to murder me. Not for some fortune she knew existed. But for what she thought was a modest insurance policy and maybe $50,000 in retirement savings. She was willing to kill me for money that wouldn't even cover half their debt. The dizziness from the poison mimosa was getting worse. My vision swam at the edges, and I could feel my heart racing in an irregular, frightening rhythm. The antifreeze was working exactly as Devon had planned, making me weak, making me disoriented, making me vulnerable for the finishing dose. But something else was happening too. Something Devon couldn't have predicted. The fear and betrayal I felt was crystallizing into something harder. Something cold and sharp and absolutely focused. They'd underestimated me. Assumed I was weak. Assumed I was helpless. Assumed I'd built nothing worth protecting. They had no idea who Brooklyn Carter really was. They didn't know about the $180 million portfolio. They didn't know about the legal protections I'd put in place. They didn't know about the team of professionals I'd assembled. The attorney, the private investigator, the detective who owed me favors. Most importantly, they didn't know that I'd been documenting their financial collapse for months. That I'd suspected something was coming. That I'd prepared for exactly this kind of worst-case scenario. I pushed myself away from the wall and stumbled down the hallway toward the powder room I'd noticed near the entrance. My hands shook as I turned the knob and slipped inside, locking the door behind me with a quiet click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. The bathroom was small but expensive. Marble countertops, designer fixtures, scented candles that probably cost $40 each. I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, almost gray. My pupils were slightly dilated. Small signs of the poison already working through my system. But my eyes were clear, focused, filled with a rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. I pulled my phone from my purse with trembling hands and opened my encrypted messaging app. 3 messages. 3 people who would understand exactly what to do. The first went to Lieutenant Grace Nakamura, Seattle PD. We'd worked together 2 years ago on a tenant fraud case. She owed me, and she was someone who didn't ask unnecessary questions. Code red. Attempted homicide in progress. 57 years old female. Suspects, family members. Poisoning via antifreeze in beverage. Address. Penthouse 2207 Harbor Steps Tower, 1221 First Avenue. Covert response required. Evidence in kitchen. Champagne flute contains ethylene glycol. Do not announce arrival. The second went to Vanessa Hartwell, my attorney and the only person who knew about Carter and Associates Holdings. Execute safeguard protocol immediately. Attempted murder confirmed. Activate forensic accountants and bring emergency medical team to Harborview Medical Center. I'm going under. Document everything. The third went to Marcus Webb, my private investigator. Omega situation. Get to Harbor Steps Tower now. Bring audio-video surveillance equipment. Park across street. Record everything from this point forward. Suspects: Riley Garrison and Devin Garrison. Crime: attempted murder by poisoning. I hit send on all 3 messages and then deleted them from my visible chat history. The encrypted app would keep them on the recipient's devices, but there'd be no trace on mine if someone checked. I splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down my chin and drip into the marble sink. My reflection stared back at me, a woman who looked every year of her age, who looked tired and scared and hurt. But underneath that there was something else. Something Devin and Riley would never see coming. I dried my face with one of their expensive hand towels and took a deep breath. It was time to give the performance of my lifetime. Time to walk back into that living room, accept that poisoned champagne, and fake a collapse so convincing they'd never suspect I'd heard every word. Let them think I was dying. Let them panic about evidence. Let them believe they'd won. By the time they realized their mistake, the handcuffs would already be closing around their wrists. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back into the hallway ready to finish this. My legs felt unsteady, partly from the poison already working through my system, partly from adrenaline coursing through my veins like liquid electricity. I steadied myself against the wall, letting my hand leave a visible smudge on the pristine white paint. Good. That would look authentic. A woman struggling to stay upright, confused and disoriented, stumbling back from the bathroom. I could hear movement from the kitchen. The soft clink of glass. Running water. They were cleaning up their workspace, disposing of evidence, preparing to serve me my execution disguised as a birthday toast. I forced myself to breathe slowly to stay in character. Weak. Dizzy. Unsuspecting. The hallway seemed longer now, the distance back to the living room stretching impossibly. Those photographs of Riley and Devin in their fake life stared down at me from the walls. Silent witnesses to my daughter's transformation from the girl I'd raised into someone I no longer recognized. Mom. Riley's voice came from somewhere ahead. Mom, are you okay? You were in there forever. I rounded the corner and saw her standing in the hallway entrance, backlit by the living room's expensive lighting. For a split second she looked genuinely concerned. Her eyebrows were drawn together, her mouth set in a small frown. Then I saw her eyes flick past me toward the bathroom, calculating whether I'd heard anything or seen anything I shouldn't have. I'm okay, I managed, making my voice thin and breathless. Just felt a little dizzy. I think maybe I need to sit down. Of course. Riley moved toward me quickly, taking my arm with a grip that was just slightly too tight. Come on. We poured you fresh champagne. It's the good stuff, Veuve Clicquot. Your favorite, remember? I'd never told her Veuve Clicquot was my favorite. I rarely drank champagne at all. She was filling in blanks, constructing details about a mother she'd never bothered to actually know. The casual invention should have hurt, but I was past hurt now. I was in survival mode. That's so thoughtful, I said, letting her support more of my weight than necessary. I shuffled my feet slightly, sold the image of a woman on the edge of collapse. You didn't have to go to so much trouble. It's your birthday, Mom. You deserve something special. The words were hollow, recited without meaning. Like dialogue from a script she'd memorized but never understood. We entered the living room and there was Devin standing by the sofa. He'd composed himself since I'd overheard them in the kitchen. His face was arranged in an expression of polite concern, though his eyes remained cold and watchful. In his hand was a fresh champagne flute, the liquid inside catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Golden. Sparkling. Beautiful. Deadly. Brooklyn, he said, his voice smooth with false warmth. You look terrible. Here, sit down before you fall down. He gestured to the sofa with his free hand while keeping the champagne flute carefully level in the other. Riley was just telling me how worried she is about you. This dizziness, has this happened before? Maybe we should call your doctor. The performance was almost impressive. If I hadn't heard him discussing my murder in clinical detail 10 minutes ago, I might have believed he actually cared. No, doctor, I said quickly, letting Riley guide me to the sofa. I just need to sit for a minute. It's probably just my blood pressure medication. Sometimes if I don't eat enough during the day, it makes me lightheaded. Well, you need to take better care of yourself. Devin pressed the champagne flute into my hand, his fingers lingering just a moment too long to ensure I had a firm grip. Here, this will help. Sugar and bubbles, it'll get your blood sugar up. The flute felt impossibly heavy in my hand. Or maybe that was the weight of knowing what it contained. 3 milliliters of antifreeze, carefully measured and dissolved into expensive champagne. Enough to cause kidney failure within 12 hours. Enough to kill me slowly while they watched and waited and pretended to care. I looked down at the golden liquid. Tiny bubbles rose to the surface in delicate streams, bursting when they reached the air. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A celebratory drink, a birthday toast, a gesture of love from family. Then I looked up and saw Riley perched on the arm of the sofa beside me. Her body was rigid with tension, every muscle tight. She wasn't blinking. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her chest rising and falling too quickly. She was staring at the champagne flute in my hand with an intensity that would have been alarming if I hadn't known exactly what she was thinking. She was waiting for me to drink. Waiting for me to seal my own fate. Waiting for the moment when the poison passed my lips and the countdown to my death began. Devin had positioned himself slightly behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and cloying that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was watching too, though he was better at hiding it. His expression remained concerned and attentive, but I could feel his focus laser-locked on my hands, on the glass, on whether I was going to drink. To you, Mom, Riley said suddenly, her voice pitched too high, too bright. Happy 57th birthday. I know we haven't been as close lately as we should be, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Everything you've sacrificed. You're an amazing mother. The lies came so easily to her. The words were exactly what I'd longed to hear for years, but they meant nothing. Less than nothing. They were just bait, manipulation designed to make me emotional enough to drink without thinking. I raised the glass toward my lips. My hand was shaking. That part wasn't performance, that was genuine fear mixing with rage, but it worked in my favor. I looked fragile. Vulnerable. Exactly what they wanted to see. The rim of the glass touched my mouth. I tilted it just slightly, letting the smallest amount of liquid touch my tongue. Sweet, with that distinctive chemical burn underneath that I now recognized as antifreeze. The taste was masked well by the champagne and what tasted like added sugar syrup, but it was there. Undeniable proof of what they'd done. I let my eyes widen slightly as if registering that something was wrong. Let my breath catch. Then I clutched my chest with my free hand. The gasp that tore from my throat was half performance, half genuine horror at what my own child had become. My fingers dug into the fabric of my blouse, gripping hard enough that my knuckles went white. The champagne flute slipped from my other hand. I didn't throw it, I just let it fall, let gravity take over. It hit Riley's pristine white area rug and shattered. Golden liquid sprayed across the expensive wool in a spreading stain, glass shards scattering like tiny diamonds across the floor. The sound of breaking crystal was sharp and final in the quiet penthouse. Mom! Riley shrieked, and her voice was perfect panic. But she didn't move toward me. She didn't reach out to catch me or help me. She froze exactly where she was, her eyes locked on the champagne soaking into her $8,000 rug. Not concern for her dying mother. Concern for the evidence spreading across her floor. I squeezed my eyes shut and let my body go completely limp. Decades of working on construction sites, of climbing ladders and walking roof edges and inspecting unstable structures. All of that had taught me how to fall without seriously hurting myself. I let my knees buckle and went down hard, my body crumpling sideways off the sofa onto the cold hardwood floor that extended beyond the rug's edge. The impact jarred my hip and sent a spike of pain up my spine, but I'd taken worse falls. I knew how to distribute the force, how to protect my head, how to land in a way that looked devastating but wasn't actually dangerous. I let my head loll to the side, my cheek pressed against the floor. kept my eyes squeezed shut, made my breathing shallow and irregular, not the steady rhythm of someone faking, but the erratic gasps of someone in genuine distress. Through my closed eyelids I could hear everything with crystal clarity. Is she dying already? Riley's voice was high-pitched and panicked, but still she didn't come to me. I could hear her heels clicking rapidly, but the sound was moving away, not closer. Devon, she barely drank any. What if? Shut up. Devon's voice was sharp as a blade. Check her pulse. No, wait, don't touch her. Pause. I could feel him moving closer, sense his presence looming over my motionless body. If she's having a real heart attack and we didn't give her enough poison, this is actually better, Devon said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Natural causes. No investigation. But we need to be smart about this. But the champagne, Riley hissed, and now I could hear genuine fear creeping into her voice. Devon, it's all over the rug. If the paramedics come and test it, if anyone tests it, then get it cleaned up. Devon snapped. Now Riley. Use club soda, blot it. Don't rub or it'll spread. Move. I heard Riley's heels clicking frantically toward the kitchen. Heard cabinets opening, bottles clinking, the sound of liquid being poured. She was trying to clean up the poisoned champagne, trying to eliminate the evidence before help arrived. Devon's footsteps circled me slowly. I could feel him leaning down, close enough that I could smell his cologne and the wine on his breath. Close enough that if I'd opened my eyes, I would have been staring directly into his face. Come on, he muttered so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Come on, you stubborn old woman. Just die already. Just make this easy. The words should have terrified me. Should have made me want to scream or fight or run. But instead I felt that cold rage solidify into something harder. Something unbreakable. He straightened up and I heard his phone come out of his pocket. The sound of him dialing. His voice shifted back to that false concern as he spoke. Yes, 911. My mother-in-law just collapsed. I think she's having a heart attack. Yes, she's breathing but it's very shallow. The address is. But he never finished that sentence. Because at that exact moment the sound I'd been waiting for cut through the night. Sirens. Multiple sirens growing louder by the second. Not the single ambulance Devon was trying to call. Not the delayed response that would arrive after they'd cleaned up the evidence and constructed their story. This was a full response. Police. Fire department. Paramedics. All converging on this address at the same time, responding to the messages I'd sent from the bathroom 15 minutes ago. Devon's voice cut off mid-sentence. I heard his phone clatter to the floor. What the? He moved to the windows and I could picture him staring down at the street below, watching emergency vehicles arrive in force. Riley, why are there so many? Did you call 911? No. Riley's voice came from the kitchen, sharp with panic. You said to wait. You said we had to be careful about timing. Then who? The sirens were deafening now, right outside the building. I could hear car doors slamming, multiple sets of footsteps, the crackle of police radios. Something's wrong. Devon's voice had lost all its smooth confidence. Now it was raw panic, real fear. This isn't normal. This is too fast, too coordinated. He did something. That old woman did something. She couldn't have. Riley was back in the living room now and I could hear her pacing, her heels clicking erratically across the floor. She was dizzy, she was confused, she barely made it back from the bathroom. Then explain this. Devon shouted and I heard something hit the wall. Explain why there are 5 police cars and 2 ambulances outside right now. The penthouse door exploded inward. Not literally, but the force of the entry made it sound that way. Heavy boots pounded across the marble entryway. Multiple voices shouted commands in that specific authoritative tone that meant law enforcement. Seattle PD. Hands where we can see them. Step away from the victim. I kept my eyes closed, kept my body perfectly limp. Professional hands were on me within seconds, checking my pulse, my breathing, my responsiveness. I felt someone lift my eyelids gently, saw blurred shapes through my lashes. Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm Officer Martinez with Seattle Fire. You're safe now. We've got you. But the voice that mattered came half a second later, so quiet that only I could hear it. A woman's voice, low and close to my ear. Mrs. Carter, it's Vanessa. The recording devices are active. Forensics has the champagne sample and the vial from the kitchen. Marcus has video from outside. You're clear. You can stop now. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I almost broke character. But I held on just a moment longer, letting my eyelids flutter open just slightly. Through my lashes I saw organized chaos. Uniformed officers. Paramedics with equipment. Plainclothes detectives with badges clipped to their belts. And beyond them, pressed against the far wall like trapped animals, I saw Riley and Devon. Their faces were drained of color. Their expensive clothes suddenly looked like costumes. All their borrowed wealth, their carefully constructed facade meant nothing now. We didn't do anything. Riley was screaming, her voice shrill and desperate. She just collapsed. We were about to call 911. This is insane. Her performance was good. Almost believable. The terrified daughter watching her mother have a medical emergency. But I knew better. I knew the calculation behind those tears. Devon tried a different approach, his voice shifting to indignant authority even though it shook at the edges. This is a massive overreaction. My mother-in-law had a dizzy spell. You're traumatizing her with all this chaos. I want badge numbers. I'm calling my lawyer. But then Lieutenant Grace Nakamura stepped into my field of vision. Her badge was clipped to her belt, her expression carved from granite and absolute certainty. Riley Garrison, Devon Garrison, she said, her voice cutting through all their protests like a knife. You're both under arrest for attempted murder. Riley Garrison, Devon Garrison, Lieutenant Nakamura said, her voice cutting through all their protests like a knife. You're both under arrest for attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. The Miranda rights continued, each word falling like a hammer blow in the suddenly silent penthouse. I kept my eyes mostly closed, just watching through my lashes as the scene unfolded around me. The paramedics were professional and gentle, checking my vital signs with practiced efficiency, but I could tell from their body language that they'd been briefed. They knew this wasn't a simple medical emergency. They knew they were part of a criminal investigation. No. Riley's voice came out as a broken whisper. No, this is wrong. This is a mistake. Her legs gave out. A female officer in uniform caught her arm before she hit the floor, steadying her with a firm grip that was more restraint than assistance. Mom. Riley's voice rose to a shriek. Mom, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake. We would never, I would never. I remained perfectly still, my breathing shallow, my face slack. Let her beg. Let her panic. Let her feel a fraction of the terror she'd planned for me. We didn't do anything. Devon had found his voice again and he was trying for outraged indignation, but it came out sounding desperate and hollow. She had a dizzy spell. We were about to call for help. This is insane. You're traumatizing a sick woman with this ridiculous display of force. Step back, sir. A uniformed officer moved between Devon and where I lay on the floor. Keep your hands visible. I want my lawyer, Devon said, his voice rising. I'm invoking my right to counsel right now. You can't question us. This is harassment. We were having a birthday dinner with family and attempting to poison Mrs. Carter with antifreeze. Lieutenant Nakamura interrupted calmly. She pulled out her phone and showed Devon something on the screen. We have video surveillance from outside this unit. We have testimony from Mrs. Carter sent before her collapse. We have the champagne sample currently being tested by our forensics team, along with a vial and syringe recovered from your kitchen. Your internet search history for the past 2 weeks includes multiple queries about ethylene glycol toxicity, symptoms of kidney failure, and how long various poisons take to be detected. The color drained from Devon's face so completely he looked like he might faint. You can't, he stammered. You need a warrant for that. You can't just come into our home and... Exigent circumstances, Mr. Garrison. When we receive credible information that a murder is in progress, we don't need a warrant to enter and secure the scene. Nakamura gestured to 2 other detectives who were already moving through the penthouse with evidence bags and cameras. You'll have plenty of time to discuss the finer points of search and seizure law with your attorney. Right now, you need to comply with Officer Rodriguez and put your hands behind your back. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs closing. Once, twice. The sound was deeply satisfying. This is insane, Riley was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks down her face. Mom, please, you have to tell them. This is a misunderstanding. We were trying to help you. You were sick and we were worried and… Ma'am, you need to stop talking. The female officer holding Riley's arms spoke firmly but not unkindly. Anything you say right now can and will be used against you. I strongly advise you to wait for your attorney. But Riley couldn't stop. The words kept pouring out, desperate and panicked. We didn't poison anyone. That's ridiculous. Why would we do that? He's my mother. I love my mother. We were celebrating her birthday. The champagne was just champagne. She must have had a reaction to her medication or something. This is all a terrible mistake. The forensics team will determine what was in that champagne, Nakamura said evenly. Along with the vial and syringe we found in your kitchen, and the stain on your carpet that you were actively trying to clean when we arrived. Riley's mouth opened and closed, but no more words came out. The reality of how completely they'd been caught was finally sinking in. The paramedics had finished their initial assessment. One of them, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient movements, leaned close to me. Mrs. Carter, I know you can hear me. We're going to transport you to Harborview Medical Center. You've been exposed to ethylene glycol, and we need to get treatment started immediately. Can you squeeze my hand if you understand? I gave her fingers the slightest pressure. Enough to confirm comprehension, not enough to break the appearance that I was barely conscious. Good. We've got you. You're safe now. They lifted me onto the gurney with practiced coordination, strapping me down securely. As they raised the gurney to rolling height, I finally allowed myself to turn my head just slightly. Just enough to make direct eye contact with Riley. She was standing against the wall, handcuffed, her silk blouse rumpled and her designer jeans suddenly looking cheap and garish under the harsh lights. Mascara tracked down her face in thick black rivers. Her mouth was open, her eyes wide and desperate. For a moment we just looked at each other. Mother and daughter. The woman who'd given everything and the woman who'd tried to take everything, including life itself. Mom, Riley whispered, and this time her voice was small and broken. Mom, please. This is a misunderstanding. You have to tell them. We would never hurt you. I would never hurt you. Please. I held her gaze. Let her see that I was fully conscious. Fully aware. That I'd heard every word in that kitchen. That I knew exactly what they'd planned, exactly what they'd done, exactly who they really were. I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, the slow, horrifying understanding that I wasn't confused or unconscious or having a medical emergency beyond my control. I had orchestrated this. I had called the police before I collapsed. I had been 10 steps ahead of them from the moment I'd heard them discussing my murder. Her mouth opened wider. You knew? You heard us? But how did you, when did you? Ma'am, stop talking. The officer holding her arms spoke more sharply this time. Seriously. Stop talking right now. But Riley wasn't listening. She lunged forward, straining against the officer's grip and the handcuffs, reaching toward me with desperate hands. Mom. Please, you have to understand. We were desperate. The debt, the foreclosure, we had no choice. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. We needed help and you had money and you were just sitting on it and… Step back. 2 more officers moved in, physically restraining Riley as she fought to get closer to me. Ma'am, if you don't calm down right now, we will add resisting arrest to the charges. The paramedics were already moving, pushing the gurney toward the door. I let my head roll back to center, breaking eye contact with Riley, listening to her voice rise to a shriek behind me. We were going to lose everything. Don't you understand? We were trying to survive. You would have wanted us to be okay. You would have wanted to help us. Mom. Her voice cracked on that last word, breaking into a raw, animalistic sound of pure desperation. The elevator doors were open, waiting. The paramedics wheeled me inside, and Vanessa appeared beside the gurney, her professional demeanor firmly in place but her eyes showing relief and something that might have been pride. You did it, she said quietly. You actually pulled it off. Through the closing elevator doors I caught one last glimpse of the penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Seattle skyline at night. The expensive furniture and meaningless art. Riley and Devon in handcuffs, surrounded by police officers. My daughter's face, twisted with panic and rage and the dawning horror of consequences she'd never imagined. Mom. Riley's voice reached me one final time, echoing down the hallway. Please. You can't do this. I'm your daughter. I'm your only family. The elevator doors closed with a soft mechanical whisper, cutting off her screams mid-word. The sudden silence was profound. Just the quiet hum of the elevator descending, the soft beep of medical equipment, the measured breathing of the professionals surrounding me. I closed my eyes fully for the first time since the performance began. Let myself feel the weight of what had just happened. My daughter had tried to murder me. My daughter was now under arrest. My daughter's life as she knew it was over. And I had made it happen. The elevator descended smoothly through the floors. 22. 21. 20. Each number ticking down felt like distance opening between my old life and whatever came next. Mrs. Carter. Vanessa's voice was gentle. We need to get you to the hospital for treatment. You did ingest some of the antifreeze and even a small amount can be dangerous. But the doctors are standing by. They know you're coming. You're going to be fine. I opened my eyes and looked at her. Really looked at her. Vanessa Hartwell, the attorney who'd helped me build Carter and Associates in secret, who'd structured the trusts and the LLCs and the protections that kept my wealth hidden. Who drafted the safeguard protocol 3 months ago when I'd first started suspecting Riley's desperation might lead somewhere dark. The evidence? I managed to whisper, my throat raw from controlling my breathing for so long. Solid, Vanessa confirmed. Marcus has video from the moment you arrived at the building. The champagne sample was collected immediately. It's already on its way to the lab, but the field test confirmed ethylene glycol. The vial and syringe from the kitchen are bagged and tagged. Riley's frantic attempt to clean the carpet before calling 911 was captured on the officer's body cameras. And your messages to Nakamura are time-stamped before your collapse, establishing that you were aware of the threat and took action. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto organized chaos. More emergency vehicles, more police, curious residents of the building being held back by uniformed officers. News crews were already setting up in the street beyond the police tape, their cameras and lights creating a circus atmosphere. As the paramedics wheeled me out through the lobby, I saw the doorman who'd looked at me with such dismissiveness earlier. His eyes were wide with shock as he watched the woman he'd thought was too poor to belong here being wheeled out on a gurney, surrounded by police and paramedics, at the center of what was clearly a major criminal investigation. The November night air hit my face as we emerged onto the street. Cold and damp and somehow cleansing. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflective under the emergency lights. They loaded me into the ambulance with efficient care. Vanessa climbed in beside me and Lieutenant Nakamura appeared at the back doors before they closed. Mrs. Carter, she said, and there was genuine respect in her voice. That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've seen in 15 years of law enforcement. Probably both. I managed a weak smile. Did we get everything we need? Everything and then some. They're going to go away for a long time. She paused. I'm sorry it came to this. Me too. The ambulance doors closed. The siren wailed to life. We pulled away from Harbor Steps Tower, leaving behind the daughter I'd raised and the life I'd built for her and the birthday dinner that had become a crime scene. I was alive. I was safe. I had survived my daughter's attempt to murder me. But as the ambulance sped through the dark Seattle streets toward the hospital, I couldn't shake the echo of Riley's final scream. The word haunted me even as the adrenaline began to fade and the reality of my survival set in. I'd won. I'd saved my own life and brought my daughter to justice. So why did victory feel so much like grief? The question followed me through the emergency room intake, through the blood draws and 4 insertions, through the battery of tests they ran to determine how much antifreeze had actually entered my system. It sat beside me like a ghost as they moved me from the ER to a private room on the 4th floor, away from the public areas where reporters were already starting to gather. The private room at Harborview Medical Center was quiet in a way that felt almost holy after the chaos of the arrest. The walls were pale blue, the lighting soft and indirect. Medical equipment beeped and hummed with steady reassurance. Proof that I was alive, that my heart was beating, that my kidneys were still functioning despite Riley's best efforts to destroy them. I lay in the hospital bed, no longer performing, no longer pretending. Just Brooklyn Carter, 57 years old, trying to process the fact that my only child had attempted to murder me for money she didn't know existed. The 4 in my left arm delivered fomepizole, the antidote to ethylene glycol poisoning. The doctor, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, had explained that I'd gotten lucky. The amount I'd actually ingested from that single sip of champagne was minimal, not enough to cause serious damage if treated promptly. The mimosa's dose had been designed to disorient, not kill. If I'd drunk the full champagne flute as planned, the outcome would have been very different. "You'll need to stay overnight for observation," she'd said, checking my chart. "But barring any complications, you should be able to go home tomorrow. You're a very fortunate woman, Mrs. Carter." Fortunate. The word felt obscene given the circumstances. Vanessa sat in the chair beside my bed, her laptop open, her expression focused and professional despite the late hour. She'd been with me since the ambulance ride, handling phone calls and coordinating with the police and managing the sudden explosion of legal issues that came with exposing my wealth and having my daughter arrested for attempted murder. "Marcus is still on site," she said, turning the laptop so I could see the screen. The display showed multiple camera feeds from his surveillance van, still parked across from Harbor Steps Tower. I could see police vehicles, evidence technicians going in and out of the building, and a growing crowd of onlookers and media personnel being held back by yellow tape. "The police are still processing the scene," Vanessa continued. "They've been there for 3 hours now. Forensics collected the champagne residue from the carpet. They literally cut out a section of the rug to preserve it. The vial from the kitchen counter. The syringe Devon threw in the trash under some paper towels. And they found 2 additional bottles in the bar area that field tests suggest may also have been tampered with." I felt my stomach turn. 2 additional bottles? "We think those were backups. In case you didn't drink enough of the champagne, or if you got suspicious and refused it. They wanted multiple delivery methods ready." Vanessa's voice was clinical, detached, but I could see anger simmering beneath her professional composure. "They'd planned this very thoroughly, Brooklyn. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated." She pulled up another screen showing what looked like official documents. "The DA's office has already been in touch. Catherine Reeves, she's the senior prosecutor handling major crimes. She says this is the most airtight attempted murder case she's seen in a decade. We have your time-stamped messages establishing you knew about the threat before you collapsed. We have video surveillance of Devon preparing the poison. We have audio from the kitchen conversation. We have physical evidence with clear chain of custody. And we have their own panicked behavior when the police arrived. Riley trying to clean up the evidence, Devon's incriminating statements." "What did he say?" I asked. "When the first officers arrived and started asking questions, Devon said, and I quote, 'She was fine until she drank the champagne.' He literally placed her at the scene of poisoning in his very first statement." Vanessa allowed herself a small, grim smile. "His lawyer is going to have nightmares about that." I stared at the surveillance feeds showing my daughter's building. Somewhere in that tower, in that expensive penthouse she couldn't afford, crime scene technicians were photographing and documenting the place where Riley had planned my death. Collecting evidence that would be used to prosecute her. Building the case that would send her to prison. My daughter. In prison. The thought should have brought satisfaction. Justice. Vindication. Instead it just felt hollow. What about the trust? I heard myself ask, though I already knew the answer. We drafted the documents 3 months ago, right after I'd found those credit card statements in Riley's mail and realized how desperate her situation had become. Executed exactly as planned, Vanessa confirmed. She pulled up the relevant documents on her screen, pages of legal text that I'd spent weeks perfecting with her. The irrevocable trust stipulates that upon your death or incapacitation under suspicious circumstances, 100% of your assets transfer to the Carter Foundation for Women's Entrepreneurship. Riley is excluded entirely. There's no mechanism for her to contest it, no loophole for her to exploit. The foundation was established 6 weeks ago and is already operational with its own board of directors. Devon never had any claim to begin with, I said. Correct. He married Riley, not you. He has no legal standing regarding your estate whatsoever. Vanessa closed that window and opened another. I've also activated the secondary provisions we discussed. All the quiet financial support you've been providing, the property tax payments on their penthouse, the minimum payments on 3 of their credit cards, Those anonymous deposits you made to their checking account every month to keep them afloat. All of it stopped the moment you were admitted to this hospital. She showed me account statements, transaction histories, a timeline of financial support I'd been providing for the past 18 months without Riley ever knowing. Thousands of dollars a month, channeled through intermediaries so it couldn't be traced back to me. Money I'd given because despite everything, despite the distance and the coldness, she was still my daughter. Within 72 hours, Vanessa continued, foreclosure proceedings will begin on the penthouse. They're already 4 months behind on the property tax, and without your payments they have no way to catch up. The bank will repossess Devon's leased BMW and Riley's Mercedes. The credit cards will default. Their carefully constructed lifestyle of borrowed money and fake success ends now. Good, I said and meant it. Let them feel what it's like to have nothing. Let them understand the life they thought I was living, the poverty they assumed I wallowed in while refusing to help them. Vanessa reached over and squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm and solid, real in a way that very little felt right now. How are you doing? Really? I closed my eyes and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. For hours I'd been running on pure adrenaline and strategic thinking. Planning my survival, executing my escape, ensuring the evidence was collected. Now, in the quiet safety of this hospital room, the emotional reality was crashing over me like a tsunami. My daughter tried to kill me, I said, and hearing the words out loud made them somehow more real and more impossible at the same time. Riley. The baby I carried for 9 months. The child I rocked through nightmares and held through tears. The little girl who used to tell me I was the bravest person in the world. She stood in that kitchen and agreed to poison me. I know. I gave her everything, Vanessa. Everything. I worked myself into exhaustion. I missed her childhood because I was building something I thought would secure her future. I hid my success because I wanted her to develop character and strength and independence. And what did I create? Someone who sees me as an obstacle. Someone who thinks my life is worth less than their credit card debt. My voice cracked on the last words. I felt tears sliding down my face. The first tears I'd allowed myself since this nightmare began. You didn't create that, Vanessa said firmly. Devon did. Riley was already insecure about money, already ashamed of her modest upbringing, already desperate to appear successful. Devon saw all of that and weaponized it. He isolated her from you, convinced her that you were hoarding resources while she suffered, painted you as selfish and uncaring. He manufactured the resentment that made murder seem justified. But she made the choice, I said, opening my eyes to look at Vanessa. In that kitchen when he laid out the plan, she could have said no. She could have walked away. She could have called the police or warned me or done literally anything except nod and say, okay. That was her choice. Her agency. Her decision. Vanessa didn't argue because she knew I was right. She'd seen the surveillance footage, heard the audio recording. There was no ambiguity about Riley's role. She wasn't a passive victim. She was an active participant. Lieutenant Nakamura will be here soon to take your full statement, Vanessa said after a moment. The prosecutors want you to testify when this goes to trial. I need you to understand what that means. Riley's defense attorney, and she'll hire the best she can afford, probably going even deeper into debt, will paint you as vindictive and manipulative. They'll claim you fabricated evidence. They'll argue you're senile or confused or suffering from paranoid delusions. They'll suggest you orchestrated this whole thing because you're angry about Riley's marriage or jealous of her success or mentally unstable. Let them, I said, sitting up straighter in the hospital bed. The four tugged at my arm, but I ignored it. Let them say whatever they want. I heard what I heard in that kitchen. I saw Devon measure poison into my drink. I tasted the antifreeze in that champagne. Those are facts, not delusions. And I'm not going to let my daughter avoid consequences just because she came from my body. Vanessa nodded and I saw approval in her eyes. That's what I needed to hear. Because this is going to get ugly, Brooklyn. It's already starting. There are news vans outside this hospital right now. The story is everywhere. Seattle mother escapes daughter's murder plot. Birthday dinner turns into crime scene. Your name is public. And within 24 hours, someone is going to dig into your background and discover Carter and Associates Holdings. I felt my stomach tighten. My wealth becomes public. Yes. The life you've spent 32 years hiding becomes front-page news. Secret millionaire mom outwits killer daughter. The media will have a field day. Every decision you've ever made will be scrutinized and judged by strangers. People will question why you hid your money. They'll call you manipulative for not helping Riley financially. They'll debate whether you somehow drove her to this. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back looked older than 57. Tired. Hurt. But not broken. There was something new in her eyes. Something harder than before but also strangely clear. Let them talk, I said quietly. I've spent 3 decades hiding my success because I thought it would protect Riley's character. I thought if she didn't know about the money, she'd develop her own work ethic and values and sense of self-worth. Look how that turned out. She developed resentment instead. She learned to see me as worthless. Maybe it's time the world knows exactly who Brooklyn Carter is. Not the persona I created, but the woman who built an empire in silence and survived her own daughter's murder attempt. Vanessa smiled, really smiled for the first time since this started. There's the woman I know. A knock on the door interrupted us. Lieutenant Nakamura entered, her badge still clipped to her belt, her expression professional but not unkind. She held a digital recorder in one hand and a notepad in the other. Mrs. Carter, she said. How are you feeling? Alive, I said simply. Good. I'm glad. She pulled up a chair and set the recorder on the table beside my bed. I need to take your statement. This is going to take a while and some of it will be difficult. But I need you to walk me through everything, from the moment you arrived at the penthouse until the moment we made the arrest. Every detail matters. I took a deep breath. Felt the 4 pull at my arm. Heard the monitors beeping steadily behind me. Looked at Vanessa's reassuring presence, then at Nakamura's attentive focus. Hey, I said. Let me tell you about my daughter's birthday gift to me. And I began. The statement took 3 hours. Lieutenant Nakamura asked questions in methodical detail, walking me through every moment from the bus ride to Riley's building through the arrest and ambulance transport. She made me describe the taste of the mimosa, the sensation of the dizziness, the exact words I'd heard through the kitchen door. She asked about my relationship with Riley, about Devon, about the financial support I'd been secretly providing. I answered every question honestly, my voice steady even when the memories threatened to overwhelm me. Vanessa sat quietly throughout, occasionally making notes but mostly just being present. A silent anchor keeping me grounded. When it was finally over, when the recorder clicked off and Nakamura closed her notepad, I felt hollowed out. Like I'd just excavated the worst parts of my life and laid them bare for official documentation. Thank you, Mrs. Carter, Nakamura said. I know that wasn't easy. Get some rest. We'll be in touch as the case develops. After she left, I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The monitors beeped. The 4 dripped. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed at something. Normal sounds. Life continuing as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Sleep, Vanessa said gently. Tomorrow we start dealing with everything else. But sleep didn't come easily. And when it did, I dreamed of Riley as a child, reaching for me with small hands, calling Mommy, in a voice that no longer existed. 3 months later, the King County Courthouse loomed before me like a monument to judgment. I sat in the witness waiting room on the 3rd floor, wearing the navy blue suit Vanessa had helped me select from Nordstrom. Our first shopping trip together where I'd actually allowed myself to buy something expensive. Professional but not flashy. Sympathetic but not weak. The kind of outfit that said credible witness without screaming secret millionaire. Through the heavy wooden door, I could hear muffled sounds from the courtroom. Voices rising and falling. Chairs scraping. The low murmur of a crowd settling in for the show. Because that's what this had become, a show. Entertainment. The salacious story that had dominated local and national news for months. Mother's secret fortune. Daughter's deadly birthday plot. Seattle woman fakes death to expose killer daughter. The poisoned inheritance. A birthday betrayal. The headlines had been relentless. My face was everywhere. The grainy security footage of me being wheeled out on the gurney. My professional headshot from Carter and Associates Holdings that someone had dug up from a real estate licensing database. An old photo from Riley's high school graduation that some former classmate had sold to the media. People I hadn't spoken to in decades had crawled out of the woodwork. Former colleagues requesting interviews. Neighbors from Riley's childhood suddenly remembering how troubled she'd seemed. Documentary filmmakers wanting exclusive rights to my story. Book publishers offering six-figure advances. I'd ignored them all. Every single request, every offer, every attempt to monetize my daughter's attempt to murder me. I had one focus: making sure Riley and Devon faced justice. The door opened and Vanessa stepped inside, immaculate as always in a charcoal gray suit. "They're ready for you," she said gently. The prosecution just finished their opening statements. Catherine Reeves is brilliant. She laid out the entire case in 20 minutes and had half the jury in tears. I stood, smoothing my skirt with hands that weren't quite steady. "How does Riley look?" "Young." Her attorneys dressed her in a conservative gray dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. "They're going for the innocent daughter manipulated by evil husband angle." Vanessa's expression hardened. "Don't let it affect you. Remember what you heard in that kitchen. Remember who chose to say yes." I nodded, forcing myself to breathe slowly. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for, dreading and needing in equal measure. Vanessa squeezed my shoulder. "Tell the truth. Stay calm. Look at the jury when you answer. They need to see your humanity, not just hear your words. You've got this, Brooklyn. You're the strongest person I know." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. Not the cavernous space from legal dramas, but a real room where real lives would be judged. The jury box held 12 ordinary people. I could see their faces clearly from the witness stand. A woman in her 60s who reminded me of my former neighbor, Mrs. Martinez. A young man with tech company casual wear who couldn't have been older than 30. A middle-aged woman whose grocery store name tag peeked out from under her blazer. Regular people who would decide my daughter's fate. The gallery was packed. Journalists with notepads. Court artists sketching frantically. People who'd lined up at dawn for a seat at the most sensational trial Seattle had seen in years. And cameras, because the judge had allowed limited media coverage given the public interest. Catherine Reeves stood at the prosecution table, tall and commanding in a burgundy suit. She'd spent the past 3 months building the case against Riley and Devon with meticulous precision. Now she approached me with a professional warmth that put me slightly at ease. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for being here today. I know this is difficult." Her voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "Can you tell the jury about your relationship with your daughter Riley?" I took a breath and began. Told them about raising her alone after Tom left. About the sacrifices, the double shifts, the birthday parties I'd planned on shoestring budgets. About paying for her education by quietly selling properties she didn't know existed. About hiding my wealth because I wanted her to develop character and independence. My voice stayed steady, but I couldn't help glancing toward the defense table. Riley sat between her two attorneys, and Vanessa had been right. They'd styled her to look as young and vulnerable as possible. The gray dress was demure, almost dowdy. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no expensive styling. Her jewelry was minimal, just a simple silver cross necklace that I'd never seen her wear before, clearly chosen to signal innocence and faith. She looked nothing like the woman who'd handed me poison champagne while wearing a silk blouse and Cartier bracelet. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. For a long moment we just stared at each other across the courtroom. I searched her face for something, remorse, recognition, the daughter I'd raised. But all I saw was desperation and something that might have been defiance. Her lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Richard Brennan, scribbled notes aggressively, preparing for cross-examination. Catherine guided me through the birthday dinner. The strange taste in the mimosa. The dizziness. The overheard conversation in the kitchen. "And what exactly did you hear Devon Garrison say?" Catherine asked. "He said he'd put 0.5 milliliters of antifreeze in the mimosa to make me disoriented and compliant. He said the champagne would contain 3 milliliters total, which would cause kidney failure within 12 hours and look like natural causes." A ripple went through the courtroom. One juror, a man in his 40s, visibly recoiled. "And what did your daughter Riley say during this conversation?" I took a breath, steadying myself. She asked what if someone questioned it. Devon told her no one would, that I had no close family or friends. That they controlled the narrative. Then Riley said, "But murder, Devon. She's my mother." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the journalists had stopped scribbling. And how did Devon respond? He said I was an obstacle to their survival. That they needed my life insurance and retirement account. That they needed it now, not in 20 years when I died naturally. My voice cracked slightly and I didn't try to hide it. And then Riley nodded and said okay. She told him to make sure I drank all of it. Objection. Richard Brennan shot to his feet. Your Honor, the witness is speculating about my client's intent based on. Overruled, Judge Morrison said firmly. The witness is testifying to what she directly observed and heard. Continue, Ms. Reeves. Catherine took me through the rest. The bathroom, the messages, the performance, the arrest. My testimony lasted nearly 2 hours and through it all I kept my composure. Kept my voice steady. Kept my eyes on the jury, letting them see the truth in my face. When Richard Brennan stood for cross-examination he came out swinging. Mrs. Carter, you've testified that you built a $180 million fortune in complete secrecy, hiding it from your daughter for over 30 years. Is that correct? Yes. And you did this, you claim, to teach her character. To make her independent and strong. Yes. Isn't it true, Mrs. Carter, that you're a manipulative, controlling woman who enjoyed watching your daughter struggle while you sat on a fortune you refused to share? No. Isn't it true that when Riley finally found happiness with Devon, you couldn't stand losing control of her life? No. Isn't it true that you fabricated this entire poisoning story because you were angry that Riley had chosen her husband over you? No. I looked directly at him, then at the jury. I heard what I heard. I saw what I saw. The forensics confirmed ethylene glycol in the champagne and in the vial from their kitchen. Devon's internet search history is in evidence. The audio recordings are in evidence. These are facts, Mr. Brennan. Not fabrications. He tried for another hour but couldn't shake my testimony. The evidence was too solid, too overwhelming. When Devon took the stand 2 days later, his performance was polished but hollow. He denied everything, claimed the evidence was planted or misinterpreted, painted me as a vengeful mother destroying her daughter's life. But Catherine demolished him on cross-examination. Played the audio recordings where his voice was unmistakable. Showed his fingerprints on the vial. Displayed his search history, lethal dose ethylene glycol human, symptoms kidney failure versus heart attack, how long detect antifreeze autopsy. I watched his confidence crumble in real time. Then came Riley's turn. The defense called her on the final day of testimony, their last hope for creating reasonable doubt. She walked to the witness stand with her head bowed, moving like someone approaching their own execution. Her hand shook visibly as she placed it on the Bible to be sworn in. Her attorney led her through a carefully constructed narrative. Devon had manipulated her. Financially abused her. Emotionally coerced her. She'd been terrified, desperate, not thinking clearly. I never wanted to hurt my mother, Riley said, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking. Devon told me she was already dying. That her heart condition was terminal. That we were just speeding up the inevitable and making it painless. I was so scared of losing everything. I wasn't in my right mind. I made a terrible, horrible mistake. Some of the jurors looked moved. The grocery store manager dabbed at her eyes. But then Catherine Reeves stood for cross-examination, and her voice was surgical in its precision. Miss Garrison, did your mother look like she was dying that night? No, but Devon said. Yes or no, please. Did she appear to be suffering from a terminal condition? No. Did she ask for help ending her life? No. Did she express any wish to die? No. At any point during the planning of this murder, and let's be clear, that's what we're talking about, planned murder, did you call the police? Silence. Did you warn your mother? Silence. Did you refuse to participate? Riley's hands twisted in her lap, her fingers knotting together. The courtroom held its breath. No, she finally whispered. Because you wanted her dead, Catherine said, her voice flat and factual. You wanted the money you thought she had. You chose that over your mother's life. Riley's face crumpled completely. She looked directly at me, mascara running down her face, her composure shattered. I'm sorry, she sobbed, her voice raw and broken. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was horrible. Please forgive me. I love you. I never meant, I wasn't thinking, please. I looked at my daughter crying on the witness stand, begging for forgiveness, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No sympathy. No love. No hate. Just a vast, empty space where a relationship used to be. The love had died in that kitchen 3 months ago. What remained now was just profound, aching sorrow for what could have been and never would be again. I held her gaze for one more moment. Then I looked away. And in that gesture, Riley seemed to finally understand that some betrayals can never be forgiven. And in that gesture, Riley seemed to finally understand that some betrayals can never be forgiven. The jury deliberations began the following morning. 6 hours felt like 6 years. I sat in a small conference room down the hall from the courtroom with Vanessa and Marcus Webb, who'd come to offer moral support. We didn't talk much. Just waited. Drank bad coffee from the courthouse vending machine. Watched the clock tick forward with agonizing slowness. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from people following the case, but I ignored them all. This moment belonged to me, to the truth, to whatever justice looked like. At 3:47 p.m. Vanessa's phone rang. "They're back," she said, standing immediately. The jury reached a verdict. My legs felt unsteady as we walked back to the courtroom. The gallery had filled again. Journalists who'd been waiting in the hallway, spectators who'd somehow heard the news, family members of other cases hoping to catch a glimpse of the conclusion to Seattle's most sensational trial. I took my seat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table. Catherine Reeves gave me a small nod of acknowledgement but said nothing. Her expression was carefully neutral, revealing nothing about what she might expect. The bailiff brought Riley and Devon in from separate holding cells. They sat at the defense table flanked by their attorneys, both looking small and diminished in their jail uniforms. Riley's eyes were swollen from crying. Devon's face was blank, emotionless, like he'd retreated somewhere deep inside himself. Judge Morrison entered and we all rose. "Please be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict." The forewoman stood, a woman in her 60s, the retired teacher who'd reminded me of Mrs. Martinez. Her voice was clear and steady, showing no emotion. "We have your honor. In the matter of the state of Washington versus Devon Garrison, on the count of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." The word hung in the air like a bell that had been struck. "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder?" "Guilty." "On the count of assault with intent to kill?" "Guilty." Devon's face remained blank, but I saw his hands grip the edge of the defense table, knuckles going white. "In the matter of the state of Washington versus Riley Garrison, on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find?" The forewoman's eyes flicked briefly to me, then back to the judge. "Guilty." Riley made a sound, a small broken gasp. "On the count of attempted murder in the first degree?" "Guilty." Riley collapsed forward onto the table, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Her attorney put a hand on her back, but she shrugged it off violently. The courtroom erupted in controlled chaos. Journalists scrambling for their phones, spectators whispering urgently, the judge's gavel pounding for order. I sat perfectly still, feeling Vanessa's hand squeeze my shoulder. Feeling Marcus's solid presence beside me. Feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite relief but was definitely closure beginning to form. "Order," Judge Morrison commanded. "I will have order in this courtroom." The noise subsided. Riley continued to sob into her hands, her whole body shaking. Devon stared straight ahead at nothing, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. "Sentencing will be scheduled for 2 weeks from today," the judge continued. "Both defendants will remain in custody until that time. This court is adjourned." As the bailiffs moved to escort Riley and Devon back to holding cells, Riley twisted in her chair and looked at me one final time. Her face was destroyed, makeup smeared, eyes red and swollen, features contorted with anguish. "Mom," she mouthed silently across the space between us. I held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then I stood, gathered my purse and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. 2 weeks later, I returned for sentencing. Judge Morrison had reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statement I'd submitted in writing, the psychological evaluations of both defendants. She sat elevated behind her bench, steel gray hair perfectly styled, reading glasses perched on her nose, looking every inch the avatar of justice she was meant to represent. "Devon Garrison, please rise." Devon stood, his expensive suit now hanging even looser on his frame. 5 months in jail had hollowed him out, made him look older and smaller than the confident man who'd mocked me for riding the bus. You orchestrated a cold-blooded murder plot against a woman whose only crime was loving her daughter and trying to teach her values, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying absolute authority. You researched dosages. You purchased poison. You measured it with clinical precision. You discussed her death with the casual indifference of someone planning a dinner menu. You showed not one moment of hesitation, not one shred of humanity or remorse. She looked down at her notes, then back at Devon with undisguised contempt. I sentence you to 25 years in the Washington State Penitentiary without the possibility of parole for 15 years. During your incarceration, you will undergo mandatory counseling and will be required to participate in programs addressing financial crime and domestic manipulation. Bailiff, remove the defendant. Devon's face remained expressionless as they led him away, but I saw his hands trembling at his sides. Riley Garrison, please rise. Riley stood on unsteady legs, supported by her attorney's hand on her elbow. She looked impossibly young in her gray dress, hair pulled back, no makeup to hide the devastation on her face. For a moment she looked like the little girl I'd raised. The little girl who no longer existed. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and looked at Riley with something more complex than simple contempt. Ms. Garrison, your case presents unique circumstances. Unlike Mr. Garrison, you had a lifetime of love and support from the victim. You had a mother who sacrificed everything for your well-being. And you repaid that love with betrayal and attempted murder. Riley's shoulders shook with silent sobs. You had every opportunity to stop this. Every chance to choose your mother over money, love over greed, conscience over convenience. At any point you could have said no. Could have warned her. Could have called the police. You chose not to. The judge's voice hardened. I sentence you to 18 years in the Washington State Penitentiary without the possibility of parole for 12 years. I am being more lenient than with Mr. Garrison because I do believe he was the primary architect of this plot. But make no mistake, you were a willing participant. You made a choice and choices have consequences. Riley turned to look at me as the bailiffs approached. Her mouth opened as if to speak but no words came out. Just silent tears tracking down her face. I watched my daughter being led away in handcuffs and felt the chapter finally, definitively close. The financial aftermath unfolded with brutal efficiency. Within 60 days of the arrest, the foreclosure on the penthouse was complete. I attended the auction out of morbid curiosity, sitting in the back row of a conference room at a downtown real estate office. The bidding was lackluster. The penthouse that Riley and Devon had paid $4.2 million for, mostly with borrowed money, sold for $3.8 million. The market had softened and the property's notorious history didn't help. Sight of the birthday poison plot wasn't exactly a selling point. The proceeds went directly to creditors. After the primary mortgage, the second mortgage, the property taxes and the legal fees, there was nothing left. Less than nothing. Devon and Riley still owed money even after losing everything. The luxury cars were repossessed within the first month. The BMW and Mercedes both auctioned off for less than the outstanding lease payments. The designer furniture was liquidated through an estate sale company, selling for pennies on the dollar. I saw photos online. Riley's carefully curated life scattered across folding tables in a warehouse, strangers pawing through her expensive delusions. Her so-called friends evaporated like morning fog. The people who'd surrounded her at charity galas and yacht parties and ski trips, people who'd benefited from her borrowed generosity, disappeared completely. Not one sent a letter to the jail. Not one showed up at the trial to offer support. Not one stood by her when the money ran out. I took no satisfaction in their financial destruction. That had never been the point. But I did take comfort in knowing that the empire I'd built, the $180 million portfolio, the 17 office buildings, the shopping centers and residential complexes, would never fall into their hands. The Carter Foundation for Women's Entrepreneurship was officially established with $150 million in initial funding. Vanessa served as board president, along with 4 other successful businesswomen I'd recruited. The foundation's mission was simple: provide grants, mentorship, and resources to single mothers trying to start businesses while raising children alone. Women like I had been 30 years ago. Women who needed a chance, not charity. Women who would work themselves to exhaustion for their children's futures. The remaining $30 million stayed in trust for my own retirement and care. More money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes, but security I'd earned through decades of sacrifice. 6 months after the trial ended, I received an envelope in my mail. Prison correspondence, carefully screened by the Department of Corrections. Riley's handwriting on the front, the same looping script I'd seen on birthday cards and school assignments decades ago. I stood in my small apartment holding that envelope for a full 10 minutes, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Part of me wanted nothing to do with words from the daughter who'd tried to murder me. Part of me needed to know what she could possibly say. Curiosity won. "Mom," the letter began, and I almost stopped reading right there. But I forced myself to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know that I understand what I did. The prison psychologist has been working with me, and I'm starting to see how Devin manipulated me, but that doesn't erase my choices. I chose to listen to him. I chose to see you as an obstacle instead of my mother. I chose money over love. I chose poison over asking for help." The letter continued for 3 pages, single-spaced, Riley's handwriting occasionally shaky with emotion. She wrote about therapy sessions where she'd finally confronted her own shame about her modest upbringing. About how Devin had exploited those insecurities, convincing her that appearance mattered more than integrity. About the cognitive dissonance of loving someone while agreeing to kill them. "I'm going to spend the next 12 years minimum in here, and I deserve every single day of it," she wrote. "I deserve more. I deserve to never see the outside world again. Because what I did wasn't just attempted murder. It was the ultimate betrayal of someone who only ever loved me." The final paragraph made me set the letter down and cover my mouth with my hand. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. But if you do, I want you to know that you were a good mother. The best mother. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. You sacrificed your own happiness for mine. You tried to teach me values, and I rejected every lesson. I failed you, not the other way around. I love you. I'm sorry." Those words mean nothing now, but they're true. Riley. I sat in my apartment with that letter in my hands and cried for the first time since the arrest. Not for Riley as she was now, but for the little girl she'd been. For the relationship that could have existed. For the mother-daughter bond that had been poisoned long before that birthday dinner. Today I'm 58 years old. A year has passed since that November night when I faked a heart attack on my daughter's penthouse floor. I still live in my rent-controlled Capitol Hill apartment, though now it's a choice rather than necessity. I still drive my 2009 Camry with the dented bumper. I still clip coupons on Sundays and wear sensible shoes from Payless. But I'm no longer hiding who I am. Carter and Associates Holdings is public knowledge now. I've done interviews with business journals and women's magazines about building wealth in silence, about the philosophy behind my choices, about what I'd do differently if I could go back. I've become an accidental advocate for financial literacy and women's economic independence. High schools invite me to speak to students about long-term thinking. Business organizations want me on panels about real estate investment. It's strange being visible after decades of invisibility, but I'm adapting. Last month, the Carter Foundation hosted its first annual grant ceremony. 15 single mothers received funding to start businesses. Everything from a mobile pet grooming service to a bookkeeping firm to a graphic design studio. I stood on that stage and told them the part of my story that mattered. The struggle, the sacrifice, the belief that hard work and smart decisions could change everything. They didn't need to hear about the murder attempt. They'd already seen that on the news. They needed to hear about the part before. The woman who'd built something from nothing while the world underestimated her. As for Riley, I haven't written back. I haven't visited the women's correctional facility where she's serving her sentence. I don't know if I ever will. I kept her letter though. Put it in a wooden box along with her baby photos, her elementary school report cards, the construction paper birthday cards she made me when she still thought I hung the moon. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive her. Maybe not. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal, even with time and therapy and tearful letters. But I'm no longer defined by what she did to me. I'm defined by what I built, what I survived, and what I'll leave behind when I'm gone. I'm Brooklyn Carter. I built a $180 million empire in silence. I survived my daughter's murder attempt. I exposed the truth and brought justice. And I'm still standing. Brooklyn Carter doesn't lose. Brooklyn Carter endures. If this story of a mother's ultimate survival had you holding your breath, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Brooklyn faked that heart attack on the floor, knowing the police were already on their way. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more jaw-dropping stories of justice and revenge. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.